Hi everyone, and welcome back to Wealth Signals with a breaking news. The Middle East may have just crossed a dangerous new line, and many experts believe the conflict that the United States has feared for years is now unfolding in real time. Over the past few days, tensions between Iran, the United States, and their allies have escalated dramatically. What began as a series of military strikes and regional clashes is now expanding into something much bigger. According to several analysts and military observers, Iran has effectively opened what could be described as a seventh war front across the Middle East. This move is not just about retaliation, it is about strategy, pressure, and reshaping the battlefield in a way that could stretch American forces across multiple regions at the same time. To understand what is happening now, we need to step back and look at the bigger picture. For decades, Iran has been building a network of alliances and influence throughout the Middle East. Instead of relying only on direct military power, Tehran developed relationships with militias, political groups, and armed movements across several countries. These groups operate in places like Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. Western military planners have long warned that if a major war ever erupted with Iran, Tehran would not fight a traditional one-front war. Instead, it would activate these different networks simultaneously, opening multiple battle zones and forcing the United States and its allies to respond in several locations at once. That exact scenario now appears to be unfolding. In recent weeks, military activity has increased across multiple areas connected to Iran's regional strategy. Missile launches, drone attacks, and naval movements have been reported across the Persian Gulf and surrounding territories. Israel has intensified its military operations targeting Iranian positions and strategic infrastructure. The United States has also responded with airstrikes and naval deployments designed to weaken Iran's military capabilities. However, rather than backing down, Iran appears to be expanding the battlefield. One of the most significant developments is the growing tension across the Persian Gulf. This region is one of the most strategically important areas in the world because it sits at the center of global energy transportation. A huge percentage of the world's oil supply passes through the narrow waterways of the Gulf, particularly through the Strait of Hormuz. For years, Iran has warned that if it is pushed into a full-scale conflict, it has the ability to disrupt this route. That possibility has always been one of the biggest fears among global economic planners. Now those fears are becoming more real. Increased military patrols, naval deployments, and drone surveillance are being reported across the region. Tanker routes are under tighter monitoring, and several countries have raised their security levels around critical energy infrastructure. Even small disruptions in this area can have massive consequences for the global economy. Oil prices often react immediately to geopolitical tension in the Gulf, because markets understand how fragile this corridor can be. At the same time, Iran's military strategy appears to focus heavily on missile and drone warfare. Over the past decade, Iran has invested heavily in developing a wide range of missile systems and unmanned aerial vehicles. These weapons allow Iran to project power across long distances without relying entirely on traditional air forces. Drones in particular have become a key element of modern warfare in the region. They are relatively inexpensive, difficult to detect in large numbers, and capable of targeting infrastructure or military installations. Reports suggest that multiple waves of drones and missiles have already been launched across different parts of the region during the current escalation. Air defense systems in several countries have been forced to intercept incoming projectiles. This kind of activity creates a constant level of tension, because even a single successful strike can escalate the situation further. Another important aspect of Iran's strategy is endurance. Unlike some military powers that aim for quick, decisive victories, Iran's leadership has often emphasized the importance of long-term resistance. The idea is simple. If a conflict becomes prolonged and costly, political pressure may build inside opposing countries. Over time, public opinion, economic costs, and political divisions could weaken the willingness of other nations to continue fighting. In this sense, time itself becomes a weapon. From Washington's perspective, the possibility of a long regional conflict is deeply concerning. The United States maintains military bases and strategic interests across many countries in the Middle East. Protecting those assets requires constant monitoring and readiness. When multiple fronts open simultaneously, the challenge becomes far more complicated. Resources must be spread across larger areas, and the risk of miscalculation increases dramatically. Another major concern is the involvement of proxy groups. These organizations operate independently, but are often aligned with Iran's strategic interests. If tensions continue to rise, these groups could launch attacks in their own regions, creating additional battlefields. This is why analysts sometimes describe the situation as a multi-front conflict. Instead of one clear battlefield, the war becomes a network of interconnected confrontations across several countries. For global markets, the uncertainty is already creating ripple effects. Investors closely watch geopolitical developments in the Middle East because energy supplies, shipping routes, and trade networks all pass through the region. When tensions rise, energy prices can move quickly. Oil traders in particular react strongly to any signal that supply routes could be disrupted. Even rumors of conflict escalation can push markets upward. But the economic impact goes beyond oil. Modern supply chains depend on stable shipping lanes and predictable trade routes. If the conflict spreads further, shipping insurance costs could rise, cargo routes could shift, and global trade could slow down. These kinds of disruptions eventually affect everything from fuel prices to manufacturing costs. Another factor making the situation more complex is the involvement of other global powers. Countries like Russia and China maintain strong strategic interests in the region. While they may not be directly involved in the fighting, their political positions and diplomatic actions could influence how the conflict evolves. International alliances, economic partnerships, and geopolitical rivalries all intersect in the Middle East. History has shown that conflicts in this region rarely remain isolated for long. Local tensions often connect with broader global dynamics. This is why many experts warn that the current situation must be handled carefully to avoid a wider escalation. For ordinary people watching these developments from around the world, the situation may seem confusing or distant. However, the consequences of regional conflicts can spread far beyond their immediate borders. Energy markets, trade networks, and political alliances are all interconnected in the modern world. A major disruption in one region can eventually affect economies and societies thousands of miles away. Right now, military leaders and diplomats are trying to balance two difficult objectives. On one hand, they want to prevent further escalation and avoid a full-scale regional war. On the other hand, they must respond to attacks and maintain deterrence. This delicate balance is extremely challenging, especially when tensions are already high and multiple actors are involved. In the coming weeks, the direction of this conflict will likely depend on several key factors. One is whether the military exchanges remain limited to airstrikes and defensive operations, or whether they expand into broader campaigns. Another factor is whether additional countries become directly involved in the fighting. Even small shifts in alliances or military deployments could dramatically change the situation. There is also the question of diplomacy. Throughout history, many conflicts that appeared to be escalating toward major wars eventually moved into negotiation phases. Diplomatic channels, backdoor communications, and international mediation sometimes help prevent the worst outcomes. Whether those efforts will succeed in the current situation remains uncertain. What is clear is that the Middle East is entering a period of heightened tension that could shape global politics for years to come. Iran's strategy of opening multiple fronts has created a complex and unpredictable environment. The United States and its allies are responding with military strength and defensive measures, but the long-term outcome is still unknown. For now, the world is watching closely. Every missile launch, naval movement, or diplomatic statement has the potential to influence what happens next. In a region where history, politics, and strategic interests collide, even small events can trigger larger consequences. The real question now is whether this conflict will stabilize before it spreads further. If tensions cool down and negotiations begin, the region may avoid a larger war. But if the cycle of retaliation continues, the risk of a wider confrontation will remain. This moment could become a turning point in modern geopolitics. The decisions made in the coming weeks may determine whether the Middle East moves toward stability or toward one of the most dangerous regional conflicts in decades. And for the rest of the world, the stakes are enormous. Energy markets, global trade, and international security are all connected to what happens in this region. So the question is no longer whether tensions exist. The real question is how far this confrontation will go, and whether the world can prevent it from becoming something much bigger. Because when multiple war fronts open at the same time, history shows that the consequences can reach far beyond the battlefield. And right now, the signals coming out of the Middle East suggest that the situation is far from over. Do you think this conflict will stay limited to the Middle East, or could it trigger a much larger global crisis? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.